The story begins in a pre-apocalyptic world. An alert sounds in the convenience store demanding everyone's understanding when picking up items. People ignore the order and break into the store, taking everything they can. Some food is thrown and the shelves start to fall. The boy with glasses we just saw is our protagonist, Chil-Soo Kang. He gets squeezed between people trying to get at least one drink. The store keeps asking for understanding from customers, but in that state people only think about themselves. The protagonist manages to grab some items and hides behind the empty shelf. Suddenly he hears the voice of a child calling desperately for his grandmother. The pre-apocalyptic world caused people to lose what little dignity was left. They beat anyone to steal as much food as they could. In the last 3 months, people had to prepare for the beginning of the apocalypse. The scenario changes to the past, and now we are going to understand how all this catastrophe happened. It all started with news that no one cared. 3 months ago, some websites started talking about an asteroid called X1 Rama. Astronomers revealed that there was a chance that Rama could pass dangerously close to Earth after entering the solar system. As soon as this news came out, the protagonist was interested. The co-worker was worried because he was overtime every day. An employee told her that he heard that the protagonist got divorced. That's probably why he spends more time at work than at home. The woman is even more worried, but she is advised to leave Chil-Soo alone. At that time, the news that Rama was just another piece of rock floating in space spread. Only astronomers were worried. Rama was largely ignored by the general public. A few weeks later, the asteroid changed its course towards Earth after entering the solar system, and television finally started talking about it. The protagonist heard the news together with his co-workers in a convenience store. The reporter says that the International Space Development Conference intends to redirect the trajectory of the asteroid by means of missiles. A thermonuclear engineer named Taku Kim is invited to explain what is happening. The man thanks the invitation. Chil-Soo stares blankly at the television. Taekyu explains that at this moment an immense rock with more than 160 km in diameter is approaching the Earth at a speed of 17.5 km per second. The reporter asks him to detail better for people to understand. The engineer agrees and says that at the speed at which the asteroid is moving, it can collide with the Earth in just 6 hours. Taekyu makes a demonstration by throwing his coffee cup against the presenters. The hit cup breaks and the engineer clarifies that the Earth will be in pieces if the asteroid collides with it. Not even bunkers will be able to save them. The woman looks scared. To make matters worse, the engineer says that even if they try to do something now, it is impossible to prevent the collision. Taekyu adds that the International Space Development Conference is planting false hopes in people's minds. It is impossible for these missiles to divert Rama's route. The protagonist's co-workers are a little worried about this information. The asteroid experts seem to have given up. People on the internet comment that the end of the world is near. The co-worker asks if they think it will really happen. One of the employees replies that he intends to return to the family if something like this happens. The girl then asks Chil-Soo if he is also worried about his parents. The protagonist coldly replies that his parents passed away a few months ago. Meanwhile, the interview with Taekyu continues, and he says that the world would have a chance of not being affected if the asteroid had been discovered at least a year ago. After a few weeks, Rama continued traveling toward land. The president of the International Conference on Space Development was forced to make a new announcement. He reaffirmed that the plan to simultaneously fire all thousands of missiles into space still stands. The goal is to change the route of the asteroid, the impact of the explosions. The president trusts the plan of his organization and reassures the population that this crisis will pass. The other countries supported that president's idea, not because they trusted him, but because they had no other option. Some followers of the church thought differently from science. The arguments were that the asteroid was heading towards Earth because of its sins. Therefore, everyone should accept the final judgment. On some signs it was written that that asteroid was a blessing sent from heaven. The protagonist watched from the car. The passers-by worried about the news. After so long, they started to worry, but there was nothing more that could be done. President Daniel promised that they could stop Rama, so they could sleep peacefully. But since that day, everything has gotten worse. Now people fight each other for food and water. The scene returns to the present moment, exactly 3 months after the asteroid announcement. The protagonist approaches the lady lying on the floor of the store and offers some groceries he took. Suddenly, he is hit in the head by some people who were running out of the store. Chil-Soo ends up being trampled. He looks at his items lying on the floor and sees that lady who helped earlier. She didn't think about helping him. In fact, she stole all his groceries and fled. The protagonist is left alone inside the store. He couldn't believe the wickedness of people. At that moment, some cans of drink that were left behind hit his foot. Chil-Soo gets up with the soda in his hand and leaves the money in the cash register. He refused to steal even in this situation because he didn't think it was fair. The boy left the store, and as soon as he stepped outside, he could see with his own eyes the missiles of the conference being fired. The sky completely changed color. At first the world had hope, but that day they felt doubts. Several pieces of debris began to fly over passers-by after the launch of the missiles. The protagonist returned home with the certainty that he would not have another day. In the end, humanity was unable to redirect the trajectory of the asteroid. Kyosu decided to take a look at his photo album before it was all over. He remembered the happy times with his family. When he closed the album, a photo of when he graduated fell. The protagonist looks at the balcony of the apartment and gets his drink. He walks there and opens the can. Some buildings around begin to crumble. The fire spreads quickly. There are a few seconds left for Rama to come into contact with the earth. At that moment, the protagonist raises the can of drink to the sky and wishes health. After that, the asteroid hits Earth and everything goes dark. Kyosu feels a light towards his face and opens his eyes scared. He sees himself back in his room, with the academic books scattered and the school uniform perfectly hanging. The protagonist gets out of bed repeating to himself that he is sure the world has ended. As soon as he looks to the side, he finds a mirror. Kyosu Kang was an ordinary office worker when he was eliminated along with humanity when the asteroid Rama collided with the Earth. But now he has returned to his 13-year-old self. The protagonist takes time to understand what happened. His room from when he was a child is the same way, so Kyosu has the feeling of living a flashback. Or at least he is watching the trajectory of his life before his eyes before it becomes paper. The protagonist touches the computer and some books to make sure it is a dream. He starts to sweat cold because he realizes that he knows all that material. The boy sits in the chair trying to catch his breath. All the items in that room are still lived in his memory. Kyosu quickly has an idea and turns on the computer. He researches the asteroid X1 Rama, but no results were found. The protagonist searches for anything related to the asteroid and again finds nothing. He tries to calm down and finally thinks about the possibility of having gone back in time. But this idea doesn't make sense in his head, and he thinks he may have been captured by aliens. Maybe his DNA has been removed, and they created a clone of himself. For the protagonist, it makes sense for the aliens to steal his memories and recreate his room. At that moment, he looks up and asks if there is anyone watching him. There is no answer, and Kyosu thinks of another possibility. Now he believes he was sent to an alternate world. The boy thinks of a million theories that explain his return in time, but he comes to the conclusion that he may have returned without any explanation. At first, the protagonist thought that catastrophe could have been a dream, but the memories of his last moments seemed so real that he discards this hypothesis. Kyosu doesn't know what to think anymore and starts crying. At the same moment, someone opens the bedroom door, and a female voice asks if he has woken up. The protagonist stares at the woman as she asks why the room is a mess. The books on the floor are collected and Kyosu remains paralyzed in the place. He thought he would never see his mother again. The woman calls his attention and looks worried when he doesn't hear any answer. Suddenly, the protagonist runs and hugs her. The mother asks if he had any nightmares. The father approaches worried. At that moment, the protagonist doesn't care if it's a clone or if this is just a dream. He just wanted to relive the memories he had with his parents. His father also hugged him, promising that everything would be fine. A few hours later, Kyosu waits for his parents in front of the National Science Museum. The father shouts that he got the tickets. The protagonist dismissed the idea of having been kidnapped by aliens after the meeting with his parents. As he remembers that they were cremated, and there would be no way to reconstruct a clone without their DNA, Kyosu is not sure how he went back in time, but decides that he will take advantage of it. The boy then enters the museum with his parents and looks closely at some models of planets, while trying to understand why he was the only one chosen to go back in time. Kyosu notices portraits of some physicists and wonders why someone more qualified did not have this chance. He is sure that these people would have a better chance of preventing Rama from reaching the Earth. Just remembering that horrible incident, the protagonist feels a deep sadness. The parents realize that he was discouraged when looking at some portraits, but Kyosu raises his head when a bright light appears before his eyes. He looks ahead and finds a perfect model of the Earth. The protagonist realizes that he doesn't have much time to waste because when he was 13 years old, the asteroid Rama was already traveling towards Earth. The difference was that no one knew at that time, and they only discovered the existence of this asteroid 3 months before all that catastrophe happened. The parents look at the model of the Earth displayed and are delighted. Kyosu realizes that he is the only one who knows what will happen in the future. But unfortunately, he has no solution in mind. The boy touches the model of the Earth while wondering what he should do. At that moment, his mother approaches and asks if he likes the land. Kyosu is scared and his father takes out his cell phone, saying that it is a great time to take a picture. The mother calls the protagonist closer, so that the model of the Earth appears in the photo. He agreed and looked at his father. At that moment, the reporter on television starts talking about the planets. Suddenly, Kyosu's memory goes back to the past, and he remembers that engineers saying that everything would have been different if people had known about the asteroid at least a year before. This memory puts the protagonist on alert. The father then calls his attention and tells him to smile at the photo. Kyosu realizes that there really may be a solution to stop that asteroid. A month has passed since that the protagonist has returned to his past. Now he has entered Haesung High School. The teacher enters the room and welcomes the newbies. She introduces herself as Yura. The protagonist has some memories of this teacher and her classmates since he went back in time. His memories have been a bit messed up, so old memories come back to his mind at certain times. In addition, in some conversations with his parents, the protagonist has the feeling that they have already talked about it. At that moment, teacher Yura decides to do a dynamic so that all students can get to know each other. She explains that she will call a student, and he must introduce himself. The first to be called is Chiyosu. The protagonist faces all the students and Yura says that he can say what he wants to be when he grows up. All attention is focused on the boy. He gets thoughtful about it and remembers that in his past life he had a dream since he was a child. But now that he knows what will happen in the future, his dream has changed. At that moment, the protagonist looks at the whole class and says that he dreams of becoming an astrophysicist. Yura praises him and asks if he intends to study something specific. Chiyosu can't get rid of those bad memories, so he replies that he wants to detect the asteroids that are approaching Earth in advance and destroy them in time. The students look at him with surprised eyes. Chiyosu keeps saying that he wants to predict the trajectory of an asteroid to save the world. Yura replies that the chances of an asteroid hitting Earth are minimal. The protagonist says that it can still happen. Some students start whispering that he is crazy and that he must have watched many movies. Others say that it is impossible for an asteroid to hit Earth. Chiyosu already expected this reaction. The teacher tries to silence everyone. Suddenly, a student stands up and shouts that technology is amazing. Chiyosu is surprised because he didn't expect support from anyone. At that moment, the student who agreed with his ideas went to him. The boy touches the protagonist's hand and says he also wants to do technology. Teacher Yura tells Taku Kim not to get in the way of his colleague. Chiyosu quickly realizes the name of the boy who came to him and has a quick reminder of the past. That amazing engineer who appeared on all the television channels talking about the asteroid was in front of him. The protagonist did not expect to find Taku in his past, especially studying in the same room as him. The teacher keeps trying to make Taku return to his place, but the boy is so excited to know that there is someone like him that he starts screaming that technology is the tower of knowledge. Taku spins the protagonist while saying that history and future possibilities depend on technology. A silence hung over everyone in the room. Chiyosu asks if he understands. Taku says that he understands that the protagonist wants to prepare for something that may never happen because the chances are minimal, but even so he wants to be prepared. That's why he loves technology. The boy adds that the protagonist is using technology without even realizing it. The teacher enters the conversation and says that his concept is very difficult to understand. Taku replies that it is not difficult at all and is ready to explain. But Chiyosu interrupts him and asks him how he wants to use technology. The boy excitedly replies that he wants to use the superstring theory, then makes the curling motion. Taku gets excited while the protagonist looks serious and says he wants to study rockets. After all the students introduce themselves, Taku asks why the protagonist doesn't study superstring theory. Chiyosu's plan is to develop a rocket engine powerful enough to change the trajectory of an asteroid. Now he thinks of a way to include Taku in the plan, but first the protagonist replies that the problem with superstring theory is that it is difficult to prove through real experiments. He also doesn't like to work with theories. Taku yells that theory is the best thing. Chiyosu draws a rocket in the notebook while explaining that likes to work with visible experiments. Taku looks carefully at the roll, while the protagonist tries to convince him to study rocket engines. The boy seems to like the subject and asks if he is thinking about the rocket propulsion system. Chiyosu replies that he is, but currently propulsion technology is not enough to redirect an asteroid. That's why it would be more interesting to create a thermonuclear engine. Taku takes the sketchbook and asks if he's thinking about a thermonuclear engine with a liquid core. For the boy, this idea is almost impossible because current scientists have not even made progress with solid core technology. But he likes the idea and asks what the speed of the rocket will be if this technology works. Chiyosu replies that he hasn't done any calculations yet, but the thrust will be more necessary than the speed. Taku assumes that he has at least an estimate, and the protagonist replies tremblingly that he expects 10% of the speed of light. The boy looks at him, and then checks the notebook again, then excitedly shouts that this is technology. He asks permission to study his idea. His eyes even shine, expecting a positive response. On the other hand, the protagonist still tries to understand what technology Taku is talking about. Even so, he accepts the help of the future thermonuclear engineer. 20 years pass and the scene changes to a messy house. The voice on television announces that the countermeasure against Rama has failed. Chiyosu and Taku listen to the Space Development Conference announce the end of the world. The previously mentioned countermeasure against the asteroid Rama was to use a rocket propulsion system to change the trajectory of the asteroid. At that moment, the protagonist looks at Taku and asks if he didn't say that everything was going well. The reporter explains on television that the plan was considered unfeasible due to technological limits. In addition, the main scientist of the project named Taku Kim took responsibility for this failure and left the position. Takyu bursts into laughter when he finds out about his dismissal on television. The reporter ends the news by saying that now the International Conference on Space Development will use missiles as a last resort. The protagonist looks at his companion and realizes his attempt to hide the frustration behind those laughs. Takyu changes the TV channel while telling the protagonist that none of the experts' taste statements, except for him, Chiyosu was the first person to find out about the asteroid X, Wama, and even gave a few interviews, but it wasn't convincing enough. As soon as he left school, the protagonist became an astronomer and discovered the asteroid 3 years earlier. His calculations were accurate, and he warned the world about the consequences of Rama hitting Earth. But it wasn't enough to get people's attention. Takyu adds that to the world, Chiyosu was just any astronomer who appeared on TV and said that the asteroid was a threat. People ignored it and thought that the protagonist just wanted to take money from them. Takyu says that he has lived with him for many years and knows that the boy would never do that. But he understands that for everyone it is crazy to hear that a piece of rock that was far away would crash into the earth. The government also did not care about his information. Now that they have nothing to do, they simply gave up. They realize that they should have believed in the protagonist and that now it was too late. Chiyosu listens in silence to his friend's complaints. Takyu goes on to say that the government had to resort to a failed resource called firing missiles. Chiyosu asks if the guy wasn't working on the rocket engine. Takyu replies that the other experts refused to cooperate. They ignored his instructions on how to build the parts, and the directors were only involved because they wanted to get political influence. That's why Takyu couldn't finish the engine. The protagonist asks aloud why he didn't tell him before that he was having these problems. The guy tries to make some excuses, but assumes that he didn't say anything because of his own pride. Kyoshu angrily asks if he hid the only chance of survival. Because of pride, Takyu shouts that it was very important for him to finish this project. He wanted to show the audience and his best friend that he could do it, but unfortunately it wasn't as he thought. The protagonist puts his hand on his face, trying to avoid crying. Takyu continues to say that it wasn't easy. Chiyosu replies that it would have been a little easier if it wasn't for his pride. He removes his glasses and wipes his tears while saying that he's sure Takyu took it as fun, because he's that kind of person. Takyu asks if he already knew then. The protagonist replies that he knew from the beginning that he would not take the project seriously, but decided to trust anyway. Chiyosu leaves the apartment and slams the door. Takyu feels better when he tells the truth to the protagonist. At that moment, Chiyosu starts walking the streets and comes across some religious people making the same protest as his past life. The boy blames himself for failing even though he knew what was going to happen. He regrets having wasted this second chance, but then remembers that he will be able to go back to the past again after the world ends. He hopes to have this chance again. After thinking about it, the protagonist buys his drink and returns home. He wishes health and Rama hits Earth for the second time. Chiyosu wakes up once again in his 13-year-old self. He checks the calendar and realizes that this time he was sent to a different date than the first time. He has now returned 2 months earlier. This means that he will not always go back to the same starting point. A few days later, Kyoshu went to school and was isolated from the students. Yura realizes that the boy is focused on his books. She likes to see the protagonist studying, but also feels bad about seeing him without friends. Takyu has fun with his classmates when suddenly his attention is drawn to the protagonist. He gets closer little by little. Meanwhile, Kyoshu tries to remember what he studied in his past life, but unfortunately he doesn't remember anything about astronomy. To make matters worse, he will have to learn everything about rocket engines again from scratch. The protagonist looks a little into the past and feels that he was an irresponsible astronomer, as he warned about the asteroid 3 years before, and after that he did nothing constructive to help stop the asteroid. He mainly blames himself for standing still while the burden of stopping the asteroid fell only on Takyu's shoulders. At this moment, Chiyosu turns his attention to his studies and seeks a solution that can alter the trajectory of the asteroid. Suddenly a voice asks how his technology is. The protagonist is frightened by Takyu and replies that he is memorizing conversion formulas. Takyu says that this will become natural if he only understands technology. The protagonist replies that he just wants to memorize it to use immediately. Takyu continues to defend the idea that it is possible to write the formulas without memorizing them if he understands technology. Chiyosu thinks about contradicting him, but knows that he will waste time and decides to put it aside. Takyu's mood changes when he notices some college books on the protagonist's desk. Chiyosu asks him to leave him alone, after which the two walk away. A month later, the class comes to an end, and the students begin to disperse to cafeteria. The protagonist prepares to leave when he hears Takyu being praised for joining the professional Mooncraft team. Chiyosu hears his colleague brag about having received several offers from professional teams. For now, Takyu is just an intern in the game, but he intends to become the captain of the team in the future. A few minutes later, the protagonist manages to approach Takyu after his friends leave. He asks if the guy hadn't said that his dream was to launch rockets. Takyu replies that his dream has also changed, after saying that he leaves him alone. Sometime later, the students return to the classroom, and the teacher warns them that today they will study the changes in master and chemical reactions. Taekyu feels sleep with this subject. The protagonist doesn't like the personality that the guy has in this new life. The class ends and Chiosu can't stop thinking that Taekyu is still the same irresponsible as always. He decides that in this life he won't count on anyone's help to stop that asteroid because he's going to do it alone. 20 years pass. The scene changes to a rocket test room. A voice warns the engineers to return to the position because the engine ignition test will start. The professionals come back and give the green light for the test to start. The experts say that everything is in perfect condition to start. A blonde takes a deep breath and says that she is sure it will work. Then she calls the protagonist a leader and asks if she can start the engine now. Chiosu replies yes. The girl looks ahead and starts the countdown. When she reaches the last second, she says to turn on the ignition. The test was successfully executed. All the engineers celebrate. The girl is also happy and realizes that the protagonist's expression has not changed. She asks if he is not happy with the result. Chiosu replies that he is happy. The woman says that if it were him, he would be ecstatic. After all, his rocket engine has just been launched for exploration on Mars. The protagonist replies that it is not yet time to celebrate, because there is a lot of work ahead. Even this test needs to be repeated a few times to be sure. The woman complains about him thinking about future work and not celebrating today's success. She even laughs, asking if Chiosu is thinking about an exploration plan on Mars right away. The woman just wanted a break after the test, but the protagonist confirms that he intends to put his exploration plan into practice, and even requested the specifications he needs. Chiosu wants to take advantage of as much time as he has to do the field tests before the X1 Rama is detected. At that moment, he gets up and calls the girl by the name of Audrey, then asks her to send today's results to the Mars Exploration Committee. Audrey tries to say something, but the protagonist leaves the test room without looking back. She is sad because she thought about watching a musical with Chiosu after the test result was positive, but she couldn't even deliver the tickets because he only thinks about work. Meanwhile, Chiosu leaves the test base and meets the manager. The guy congratulates him on the success of the test. The protagonist can only think that this Smilov boss messed up the whole creation of the engine. If it wasn't for him, the development of the engine would have been done a year earlier. He is the typical greedy and incompetent boss. At that moment, Smilov asks the protagonist to wait for him to make a call. Chiosu asks if the matter was urgent because he can't wait to leave. The boss replies that it is a little important. Apparently there is an asteroid that can pass close to the Earth. The protagonist widens his eyes listening to this. He realizes that this time the experts found out before he told him. Chiosu soon asks if there is already a team setting up a task force. The boss answers yes, and he asks who will lead. Smilov thinks for a moment and says that he chose Charlotte because she is already working on asteroids. At that moment, a silence takes over the place. The boss knows that the protagonist wanted to lead, but he thinks that Charlotte is the best in this case because she is the expert in the area. Then the protagonist can continue at the test base. Chiosu begs the boss to listen. He says that the task force team also needs an engine specialist. The boy shows some research documents and asks Smilov to take a look. According to the research, there are at least 10 asteroids that can collide with Rama. Sometime later, the scene changes for the task force team. They study the asteroids that can collide with Rama or the Earth. Charlotte makes it clear that she doesn't think she will have major problems solving the matter. The protagonist expected this obvious answer. Charlotte replies that she already has a plan in mind. Chiosu questions if she is planning to redirect the asteroid with missiles. The woman reveals that it is and adds that this is the safest and most economical solution. However, the protagonist replies that a nuclear impact will not be enough. Charlotte asks what her plan is then. Chiosu says that the most likely now is to install thermonuclear propulsion engines on the surface of Rama and push it away from the Earth. Charlotte agrees that this plan is better, but it would have a high cost and it would be difficult to install thermonuclear engines on all the rockets. The protagonist replies that he heard that the task force received a lot of resources. Charlotte replies that it still has the cost of maintenance. Chiosu asks if she really cares about the cost of maintenance when humanity is at risk. The woman starts to get angry and accuses the protagonist of being exaggerated, but he continues to defend his theory, so Charlotte says out loud that she doesn't need thermonuclear engines. Instead, she will use missiles. Audrey realizes that the woman doesn't want to listen to their idea and asks if from the beginning she didn't consider thermonuclear engines as a solution. Charlotte replies that she considered, but in the current situation it is impossible to follow this plan. The protagonist lowers his head, realizing that Charlotte is right, but missiles will never be the solution. The protagonist knows that if he says that the asteroid is coming towards Earth, he will end up being called crazy. So he needs to think of another plan. At that moment, Charlotte turns her back on the team, while saying that the decision will be hers, since she is the only one here specializing in asteroids. She also says that she did not invite the protagonist and Audrey to create plans. They are only here to talk about engines. Chiosu feels frustrated for not being able to do anything for the second time. but he is not willing to give up. At that moment, Charlotte asks if the protagonist has any objections. He is silent. Meanwhile, the woman can only think that she only accepted him in this room because the boss Smilov asked, as she does not hear any answer. Charlotte ends the meeting and decides to leave with her team. Audrey asks her to wait. The protagonist finally gains courage and says that Rama is not heading towards an asteroid belt. He ends up dropping the leaves on the ground while saying that Rama will change the path and his final destination will be the Earth. Kyosu decided to risk everything by telling the truth. Because he had no other option, they look at each other for a few seconds. Charlotte breaks the silence and asks if he has any proof of what he is talking about. Kyosu looks at the woman and she keeps repeating the same question. He assumes that he has no proof and Charlotte asks with hatred in her voice if he thinks everyone will trust his words. She starts accusing Kyosu of wanting attention when everyone in that place is concerned about the safety of the land. Charlotte also tells him to control his ego a little. After that, she ordered the protagonist never to go near a task force meeting again. Audrey looks scared at what just happened. She worries about the protagonist, and when she looks, she realizes that he is shaking. Kyosu did not give up on convincing people about Rama. He just gets lost on how he's going to do it. Maybe talking about an apocalypse should be enough. Audrey looks scared at Kyosu. A little later that day, the protagonist decides to drink in a bar to forget what happened a few hours ago. At that moment, a man hands over the magazine card. He introduces himself as Oliver Townshend, a reporter for the magazine. Oliver received a call from the protagonist to meet him in that bar. He makes it clear that his magazine is not scientific, but is anxious to know why a member of the Space Development Conference called him here. Kyosu drinks all the alcohol and replies that Oliver doesn't have to worry, as everyone in the world will be interested in what he will tell. A few days later, the protagonist is hit in the face with some magazines. Someone yells asking if he has gone crazy. Kyosu made some headlines after that interview, where he stated that the Earth is threatened by something called the asteroid Rama. The magazine also stated that this comment came from the member of the International Space Development Conference. The protagonist said at all times that the Earth will be destroyed if they do nothing. Unfortunately, that magazine reached the Chief Smilov, and he was annoyed by the words of the protagonist. The man accused him of going crazy and leaking various internal information from the Space Development Conference. The protagonist apologizes and says that it was not his intention, but Smilov says that it doesn't matter because now he has tarnished the reputation of the organization. The other employees hear the boss shouting outside the room. Kyosu begins to organize his things after being fired. At that moment, Audrey invades the room and asks the protagonist if the reporter took his lines out of context. She's sure the magazine wrote those nonsense to promote themselves over their organization. Kyosu looks at her and replies that nothing was taken out of context. He confesses that he did the interview knowing exactly what would appear in the articles. Audrey is surprised and asks why he did it. Kyosu turns his back and walks in the opposite direction. She runs after him and asks what the boy will do now. The protagonist replies that he will take advantage of his free time to tell the world about the threat that Rama poses. Audrey does not believe that he will give more interviews. Kyosu says that he intends to do just that. She reminds him that the organization can sue him. The protagonist replies that there is a chance. The girl sadly watches him leaving and asks if she can do something for him. Kyosu gets into the elevator and replies that she can't do anything. The scene changes to a few days later. A girl named Evelyn hosts her talk show. She introduces today's special guest who is at the top of the week's top news. The camera switches to the protagonist and Evelyn introduces him as the lead scientist of the nuclear engine team at the Space Development Organization. Kyosu corrects the presentation by saying that he is now a former team leader. Evelyn continues the interview and asks if he's here to tell you about an alien race kept secret by the Space Organization. Kyosu replies that it's not alien civilization. He wants to talk about the asteroid Rama. The protagonist tries to warn about the danger of Rama coming towards Earth. Evelyn forces a drama while asking if she has a chance of hitting them. Kyosu replies that yes. The girl mockingly questions what an engine expert understands about asteroids and asks for some evidence. Kyosu agrees that he is not an expert in astronomy, but he can still make variations based on pre-existing data. The protagonist tells how he used some scientific data to reach that conclusion. The audience does not understand anything he says. The cameramen seem lost too. Even Evelyn feels sleepy in the middle of the explanation. Suddenly, a scientist breaks into the transmission and tells the protagonist directly that he doesn't understand his reasoning. Kyosu tries to explain, but the man insists that he currently doesn't have any optical instrument that can give a clear image of something so far away. The protagonist knows that that guy is right. He only knows that Rama is heading towards Earth because he has already lived the future 2 times. The scientist asks if Kyosu has at least calculations that support his claim. Everyone expects an answer from the protagonist, but he really has nothing to show. The interview finally comes to an end. The cameraman thanks Kyosu for his presence. Then he talks to Evelyn and she asks if this guy really worked in the space organization. She confesses that she understood absolutely nothing of his explanations. The cameraman agrees that it sounded crazy. but he thinks that the protagonist would do well if he chose to be an author of books instead of a scientist. Kyeolsu arrives at the parking lot totally exhausted. He gets into the car knowing that he failed again to warn people of the danger of Rama. The protagonist doesn't know anymore what to do. Suddenly his cell phone starts ringing. Kyeolsu decides not to answer because he is sure it is Smilov. He puts the cell phone in the back seat of the car without realizing that it was actually Audrey on the call. Suddenly his attention is drawn to some men who surrounded the car. One of the guards pulls out the phone and says that Smilov wants to say some things. The protagonist is forced to listen to curses from his old boss. Smilov says that he really went crazy and keeps saying the same nonsense to the TV. The guy is about to say that he will sue him when he is interrupted. The protagonist says that Rama has already changed the route and you better keep an eye out. He adds that missiles will not work. Propulsion systems is the only answer. Smilov gets annoyed that he keeps saying that. The protagonist does not give up and says that the only way to survive is to focus resources on developing propulsion systems. The former boss replies that he is tired of this nonsense and makes it clear that the organization will sue him. The protagonist uses the last seconds he has on the phone to tell them what they need to do about the asteroid. Smilov hangs up the call and throws the cell phone away. The man blushes with anger and looks at an image of Kyeolsu on the company's computer. He wonders how an idiot can know the path of an asteroid. At that moment, someone knocks on the boss's door. Smilov curses the employee and says he doesn't want to hear nonsense about asteroids. Suddenly, a man appears behind the boy and says that he came to talk about exactly that. Smilov lowers his voice immediately when he realizes that it is Principal Daniel. The principal interrupts his apology and says that Rama's final orbit calculation is complete. Rama really is traveling to Earth. The scene changes to a few hours later in the space organization. The elevator opens and the employees look in shock at the new guest. Audrey is the only one happy. The protagonist greets everyone and introduces himself as the new head of the asteroid defense team. After a few days of work, the press makes a live broadcast in front of the Toothville Space Center. The reporter reports that the Space Development Conference announced that at 10 o'clock in the evening the rocket will be launched. Many curious people are already on site. The project is called Atlas and is led by Kyeolsu. It aims to launch a total of 30 rockets and land on the surface of the asteroid. The rockets will use their momentum to push the asteroid away from Earth. Today, 10 rockets will be launched, but the International Space Development Organization intends to launch the additional 20 as soon as they are ready. The next launch will be in 3 weeks and the last one will take place in 6 weeks. The journalist asks the reporter why it will be 3 separate launches instead of launching them all at once. The reporter replies that it is because of the distorted and elongated shape of Rama. Each rocket will use a special landing mechanism to land at various points on the asteroid. The journalist praises the method created. A few hours pass and it finally arrives the moment of the first rocket being sent. A countdown begins at the base. Engineers take off the rocket while experts follow the flight. The engines look perfect and the rocket has successfully left Earth. Kyeolsu and Audrey follow the trip through the cameras. The next day, Audrey celebrates that the 10 rockets were successfully launched. But as we can see, Kyeolsu doesn't have time to talk. He tells someone on the phone that the 13th rocket is weird. It seems that there is a problem with the L3 or N1 valve, so he asks the engineer to replace both valves because the rocket needs to be in perfect condition for the next launch. The engineer thinks this is an insignificant detail. The protagonist shouts, asking if the guy is crazy. If there is any mistake, the rocket will explode in the atmosphere and the damage will be devastating. The engineer tries to argue, but Kyeolsu loses his patience and fires him. Now the protagonist finally realizes that what Taki said about these experts, it was true. Maybe it would be better if the friend was here now. The protagonist remembers their last argument in the past life and decides that he will go alone. At that moment, he finally notices Audrey in the corner of the room and asks if anything happened. The girl's mood has already changed, and she just repeats the information about the launch of the 10 rockets having been successful. Kyeolsu vaguely replies that this is good while checking the time, and asks if she has anything more to say. The girl replies no. The protagonist then thanks her for the work and says that she can go now. Then her phone rings and he answers the call. Audrey looks sadly at Kyeolsu and leaves the room. 3 weeks later, the second release takes place. Kyeolsu and Audrey are already looking at the cameras, while the director keeps his eyes fixed on the protagonist. They are informed that the landing was successful. Now the propulsion system 10 will be fixed in place. The order is given for the start of the drilling. The protagonist's face does not look good at all, and Audrey notices it. She says that the mission is going well, and maybe it's better for him to go home to rest. Kyeolsu replies that it won't be necessary. The girl tries to say that he is the main piece of the mission, and it will be bad if he gets sick. But the protagonist keeps looking at the live stream, while saying that they can't make any mistakes. At that moment, the last projectile is fixed on the asteroid. Audrey hugs the protagonist and celebrates. The other employees jump for joy. Finally, a smile appears on the protagonist's face. Now just use the propulsion system. Suddenly, bad news arrives. the employees report that there is an error with the Atlas R10. The gravitational force on the site is stronger than they expected. The protagonist asks if there are similar areas near the landing sites of the other propulsion systems. The engineer replies no. Audrey analyzes the transmission and says that she is not sure if it is possible to pull the Atlas back and land it somewhere else. It can slip and fall. The reason for the error is that the rocket landed on the surface of the asteroid Rama, which is steeper than they thought. Audrey thinks of a solution. At that moment, the experts start screaming that another problem happened. The protagonist asks worried what it was, but everyone is silent. He screams again, asking what happened, and is informed that the base lost signal with 3 rockets, the R10, R-05, and R-06. The ground underneath them simply collapsed. Audrey asks Screard if they missed 3 rockets. At that moment, the protagonist's vision becomes dark and he falls to the ground passed out. Sometime later, the boy finally regains consciousness. Audrey runs to him, asking if everything is okay. The protagonist remembers with difficulty what happened before everything went dark. He tries to talk and Audrey runs out of the room, informing everyone that the boy has woken up. The employees of the organization appear. Smilov begins to blame the protagonist for the failure and says that he always knew he was a madman. The others agree with the boss and say that they shouldn't have believed Chielsu. That's not what Audrey wanted to happen. At that moment, the director Daniel demands that everyone be silent and says that it's not time to point blame. Chielsu looks at the director and receives the terrible news. Daniel says that unfortunately the Atlas project failed. The protagonist feels a chill run down his spine. The director pushes the employees away and says that this may be disappointing, but he never got his hopes up. The director says that even so, he will not tell the audience that the project failed. The public's agitation will only hinder the organization's evacuation plan. The protagonist asks what he means by evacuation plan. The director questions if he really thought he had the fate of humanity in his hands. Daniel confesses that the organization has prepared the best alternative plan since they discovered the asteroid Rama. Chielsu keeps his head down as he wonders which one. It's Plan B. He realizes that the organization lied when it said it could no longer fund the engine tests. Probably the money was being destined for the evacuation plan. The director says that now that the Atlas plan has failed, they want to entrust the evacuation plan called Noah to the protagonist. Daniel says that he is sure that a man of talent like Chielsu can take charge and ensure the success of the project. The director waits for an answer. The other employees are open-mouthed, realizing that the protagonist was chosen to lead the Noah project. A few weeks later, the scene changes to the Fort David space base. The final phase of Project Noah is initiated. Scientists begin to enter the ship. The protagonist looks without any reaction to Plan B. Audrey is already in the proper clothes and asks if he really won't. Chielsu replies that his health has not improved yet. The girl says she needs him. Both the Atlas project and the Noah project were only possible because of him. The protagonist calmly replies that Audrey will be there along with the other scientists, so he is sure that it will work. In fact, the protagonist is frustrated that his plan has failed. At that moment, Audrey starts to call him a liar. She screams that the protagonist can't trust anyone, so he always acts alone. Audrey questions if he thinks he's so good that he doesn't want to go to space with them. She decides that she won't either since the leader of the plan refuses to go. Audrey throws the equipment on the ground while Chielsu tries to calm her down. He says that if she doesn't go, there will be no one to manage the ship's engine. Audrey screams that she doesn't care, but it is enough for the protagonist to hold her hand that she starts to cry. Audrey says that she is tired of seeing him blame himself for Atlas' failure. She adds that she has worked with him for many years and has never seen him give up like this before. Chielsu takes a deep breath and confesses that he is not giving up. In fact, he has a reason to stay behind. The girl questions what it is and he is silent. Audrey can't hold back her tears and asks why she is the only one who is sad about all this. At that moment, she receives a call saying that she must get on the ship now. Chielsu looks at her and promises that he will meet her again. Audrey asks if he intends to do this after everyone is exterminated. The protagonist holds her hand while saying that it doesn't matter, they will meet again someday. Audrey understands that this is a farewell, so in the last conversation she asks the protagonist to trust her in the next life. After that, Audrey entered the ship and took off. Sometime later, Chielsu decides that his end will be this time in a public square. He opens the soda can while saying goodbye to the third chance. The asteroid hits the Earth for the third time and everything goes dark again. Moments later, the protagonist opens his eyes and finds himself again in his past. Outside, his mother asks him to get up because it's almost time for school. A few years later, Chielsu watches the students have fun during their school break. He understood that detecting the asteroid early, or correctly predicting its course, will not prevent catastrophe. Advances in engine technology will also make no difference. This time the protagonist feels more lost than ever, since all the previous times he tried something different and failed. Chielsu has already learned that he can't count on Taekyu in any press. At that moment, the image of Audrey appears in his head. In the girl's last moments, she asked him to trust her in case they met again. Suddenly, the protagonist is taken out of his thoughts by a voice that asks if he is not studying technology. Kyulsu is startled and realizes that Taekyu is angry. The boy doesn't stop asking if he gave up studying technology. The protagonist looks towards the academic books and says that he gave up. He thinks it doesn't make sense to study engines anymore. Taekyu can't believe it, but Kyulsu says that he really gave up because he lost interest. One awkward silence hangs in the air. The protagonist wonders if it was so obvious that he was lying. Taekyu angrily asks if after he stole someone else's technology he will give up halfway through just because he doesn't find it fun anymore. Kyulsu asks confused how he could steal his technology if Taekyu gave up working with it, because he preferred to become a professional player. The guy tries to argue but realizes that he is really wrong. Taekyu then sits in the chair and says that technology means the best, then points to himself and says that he is the best. The protagonist says that he did not understand anything about the comparison. The guy replies that it means that he is the best. Kyulsu asks if Taekyu felt threatened by him. The guy confesses that this is exactly what it is and accuses the protagonist of being slow to understand things. He explains that Kyulsu was studying technology at such a frightening pace that he felt he could never catch up. Taekyu says that whenever he looked at the protagonist, he realized that he was in front of him, becoming everything he had dreamed of. Taekyu created several images of the protagonist in his head where he was completely cruel. Kyulsu makes a summary of everything he heard and gets discouraged. He realizes that Taekyu gave up on his dream because he would never settle for being the second best. That was the reason why the boy decided to be a professional player. Taekyu was sure he would be the best in that field. The boy confirms his line of reasoning. This also makes the protagonist understand that his classmate will go back to studying about engines just because he gave up. Taekyu replies that he missed thinking about how to make engines. The protagonist lowers his head in frustration, thinking about how stupid this guy is. Taekyu continues his winning celebration. Kyulsu says that he will leave this matter to him, so suddenly the two are interrupted by a female scream. A red-haired girl asks for more time to pay her debt, but the black-haired girl says that she is given enough time, so he tells the girl to stop running away and hand over her money. The protagonist recognizes the black-haired girl as Yumi Gong. The scene changes to the past, when the teacher welcomed the first day of the new semester, then called Yumi to introduce herself. Yumi was direct and said that her dream was to be the richest person on the planet. She already has some investments, and also gets loans, so she warns all students that if they need money, just talk to her. The loan is about 1.5% interest per month. The girl makes it clear that if they don't make the payments on time, she will get this money out anyway. This statement left all the students shocked. The teacher tries to end the presentation as soon as possible, but Yumi continues. She goes to the blackboard to explain how a loan statement works. The teacher says that she doesn't need to do that and tells her to go back to her seat. It was on that day that the protagonist discovered Yumi's existence, and also learned that everyone in that school found her unpleasant. Some rumors said that she forced debtors to work for her. Others said that she sued people for not paying their loans. But there was a rumor of Yumi that made everyone afraid. They said she marked the debtors and they were left with a bad credit rating for the rest of their lives. The scene goes back to the current moment, and the students approach the girls who are fighting. The girl with red hair is called Sammy, and it seems that she needs a few more days to pay Yumi. The students advise her to do it soon because Yumi doesn't seem to be nice at all. Sammy just turns his back and leaves, believing that the rumors about Yumi are false. After all, Yumi is also just an underage student, so it was ridiculous that she could actually punish them the way she said. It seems that Sammy was right because after everyone leaves, Yumi lowers her head sadly. The protagonist also thought that those rumors were exaggerated. Ultimately, of the class, Kyulsu and Taekyu were responsible for cleaning the room and taking the math homework to the teacher's room, but Taekyu let the protagonist solve everything himself. Suddenly, when Kyulsu goes downstairs, he hears a scream from someone saying that he will pay for this garbage. Yumi tells Sammy that he also has debts to pay and cannot let that day pass. In addition, she promised that she would pay off the entire loan at once. The protagonist hides behind the wall after hearing the commotion. He needs to use that corridor to get to the teacher's room, but he doesn't want to go through the girls, and that's why he prefers to leave it to go when it's all over. Yumi screamed at the red-haired girl, who all this time has been watching to know who she really is. Sammy replies that she was the one who was wrong about her personality all along. Sammy's friends start saying that they are tired of this fight every day. The girl takes advantage of the fact that her friends are there and decides to make a drama. She starts crying and asks if Yumi ever thought of her as a friend. The girls start to welcome Sammy. Yumi looks at the girls with no emotion on her face and says that her friends must keep their promises, then demands that Sammy stop pretending to be crying and return her money. This is her last request. Sammy wipes away tears and asks if this is the last warning because she intends to call her parents. Yumi replies that she will only sue her. The girl gets up shocked and screams, asking if she is going to do it anyway. Yumi shows the contract they made and says that time is up. Sammy can't believe that the girl will do this. Yumi says that she really thought about calling her parents, but she knows that it will come to nothing because parents must have the same attitude as Sammy. That's why suing becomes the easiest way. Sammy is incredulous at these words and accuses Yumi of offending her parents. The girl with black hair says she just wants the money back. At that moment, Sammy raises his hand to hit her. The protagonist follows the fight and doesn't dare to leave the hideout. Yumi says coldly that the girl can hit him in the face as many times as she wants. Just be ready to pay the price. After all, you can simply report her for assault and Sammy will receive a suspension on his academic record. The red-haired girl realizes that she will really leave but harmed in this story, so she lowers her arm and screams that she will pay, then asks if her friends can lend some money. The girls agree and Sammy throws the money in Yumi's face. She says that after that she doesn't want to know about the girl walking with them. Sammy leaves the hallway with her friends after finally paying. Yumi takes a deep breath and starts collecting all the money bills that are on the ground. A wind passes and ends up taking some bills further. The girl continues to take the money and finds the protagonist hiding. The two stare at each other for a moment. It seems that the girl was going to say something and decided to keep quiet. She also advises her to be more friendly next time, because if she continues like this, she will have problems. Yumi asks what he has to do with it, and the protagonist replies that nothing, but it is distressing to watch this scene. Yumi says that she is just doing things her way. She adds that she knows that the protagonist does not understand why he spends every moment he can with his head stuck in a book, so the girl makes it clear that she only accepts advice from those who have social skills. After saying that, the girl leaves. At that moment when she denies his advice, the protagonist has a quick reminder of Audrey, where she says that she is willing to help him and he denies help. Kyosu wonders who is this woman who always appears in his mind. This time the boy went back in time without much information from his previous life, so he doesn't remember Audrey. The next day arrives. Sammy alters a little what happened in his meeting with Yumi. The classmates who listen to the story are scared. They ask if Yumi really threatened to sue her parents. Sammy replies that yes and says that her friends saw everything. Mahi and Jiang confirm the story. The girl makes her drama as usual and Yumi listens from the corner of the room. Everyone whispers about her. The girls bring back those rumors about the girl forcing the debtors to work and paying very high interest. Yumi gets up and then looks at the girls. She prefers to leave the room. Sammy's friends comment that Yumi is angry even though she is the wrong one. The protagonist keeps his head down listening to the girls tease Yumi. At that moment, another memory of the past invades his mind. Kyosu has some flashbacks to when the organization's employees laughed at him and called him crazy. The boy doesn't quite understand what this means because he doesn't remember these people, but focuses on what's happening now. The protagonist leaves the room and looks for Yumi. The girl is crying near the elevator. She notices the protagonist approaching and says that she doesn't want him to feel sorry for her, but if he wants to comfort her, he can offer money. Kyosu replies that he is not here to comfort her. The girl turns towards him waiting for an answer. The protagonist says that he came to offer a solution to her problem. She quickly questions why he is doing this. Kyosu still does not have all the memories of his past, but from the flashbacks it is possible to see that he was the victim of false rumors. So he is trying to help her because of what he suffered, but he knows he can't say that to her. At that moment the protagonist lies, saying that he is helping because he can't concentrate on his studies when the atmosphere of the room is like that. This answer makes the girl burst into laughter. She turns her face, not being able to contain her laughter. The protagonist is surprised because he didn't think the girl knew laughs. Yumi takes a deep breath and asks what the solution will be. Kyosu begins to explain. The next day the bell rings and the students begin to leave the room. Kyosu looks ahead and Yumi makes the OK sign with her hand. At that moment the plan of the two begins. The protagonist goes to the girl and asks aloud if she still lends money. The students look at them to follow the conversation. Yumi happily replies that she can lend him money and asks how much he needs. Kyosu asks for 2,001 to go to internet cafe after school. He promises to pay tomorrow. Suddenly Yumi starts laughing and asks if he's really only asking for 2,001. The protagonist asks he makes small loans and the girl replies yes, so that it is more than 1,001. Yumi pulls out a contract while saying that it will be 1.5% interest per month. Kyosu quickly signs the paper. The scene goes back to the previous day where the protagonist started to create a plan with Yumi to help her reputation. The plan started with a simple loan from Kyosu. At that moment Yumi says out loud that she got another customer today. Then she says she is going to the bathroom. The girls follow her with their eyes and soon approach Kyosu. Sammy asks why he did it and says again that Yumi is dangerous. Yumi is hidden behind the door listening to the girls talk about her. The protagonist asks what are the rumors that the girls have heard. Sammy explains that he has heard that Yumi sends bad people to go collect people who do not pay the debt on time. She also accepts clothes and objects if they cannot pay off the debts. The girl tells several rumors that she heard and says that she no longer trusts Yumi. Then he asks the protagonist to be careful. He replies that he understands but questions if it wouldn't be easier to pay the debt on time. Sammy replies that anyway he feels that there is something wrong with Yumi. After all, she hangs out with bad people. The protagonist asks if Sammy has seen Yumi with these people or just heard the rumors. Sammy stutters when answering that he didn't see it in person. Jiang joins the conversation and says that Sammy heard this from a friend who studied with Yumi in elementary school. Sammy reluctantly agreed. The protagonist finds a good opportunity to ask Sammy who is this friend of his from elementary school. The three are silent, not knowing what to answer. Sammy stutters, saying that he doesn't remember the name of this friend. She doesn't understand why the protagonist is asking so many questions, then asks why he is defending Yumi so much. Kyosu replies that he is not defending. It turns out that he heard different rumors about Yumi. Sammy soon asks what the rumors are. The protagonist's plan with Yumi from the beginning was to spread rumors about her just like other people already do. Yumi was afraid of him making up bad things like everyone else. At that moment, Chiyosu tells Sammy that he heard rumors about Yumi being a very nice person when there is no money involved. The truth is that the girl makes so many loans that she fears she won't get anything back. So she worries and asks for what is rightfully hers. But she is a completely different person if there is no money involved. Sammy asks surprise who told him these rumors. The protagonist replies that he doesn't remember. The girl then asks if he really wants her to believe in something when he doesn't even remember who told her. This was the answer Chiyosu expected to receive from the beginning. During the plan, he told Yumi that he would leave holes in Sammy's story, so Yumi would know that the right time to enter would be when he pointed out. The protagonist follows the plan, and at that moment Yumi enters the room. She asks why she should believe Sammy's rumors if she doesn't even remember who told it. Sammy is surprised while the protagonist plays dumb. Yumi asks the girl to bring her friend from primary school to tell her about the rumors, but if she doesn't remember this friend, then it will be easy to believe Chiyosu's rumors. Sammy realizes that Yumi is right. At that moment, the other students begin to comment that really everything they have heard are rumors. None of the rumors have come true so far. Suddenly, someone screams asking if it was Sammy who made it all up. The red-haired girl despairs and starts screaming that she has witnessed some cases in person. Even her parents were threatened by Yumi. She looks at her friends hoping they will confirm that they saw everything. The girls start stuttering while confirming that they were there. Sammy points to Yumi saying that she has witnesses and asks what she is going to do now. Yumi replies that she really did it and says that she owns up to her mistakes, unlike Sammy who keeps spreading rumors even though he knows they are false. At that moment, Yumi asks Jeong if she remembers the rumors that came up that she had cheated on the test. Minnie also sweated to explain that she didn't buy the sneaker with the class's money. At that moment, Yumi says that it was Sammy who was spreading all these rumors. The whole class looks at the girl. Sammy gets nervous and asks if Yumi has any witnesses or proof. Minnie confesses that she remembers hearing Sammy say something about Jeong cheating on a test. Jeong decides to open his mouth and says that he also heard Sammy accuse Minhee of buying sneakers using the operating expenses of the class. In the end, her friends exposed everything she did in recent years and all the rumors made up. Sammy assumes that she really lied about a lot, but it is true that Yumi insulted her parents. She starts crying, trying to convince people that she is the victim. Yumi assumes that she went too far when talking about her parents in the middle of the confusion, but she wouldn't have done it if Sammy had paid the debts. The red-haired girl is scared when she sees the girl for the first time showing feelings. The truth is that Yumi also made a point of doing her drama and said she was very sorry. To complete the show, she starts crying. At that moment, the students stand next to Yumi and accuse Sammy of cheating. They say that the girl asked for the loan already knowing that she would not pay, so she made up those rumors so that Yumi would come out as wrong. Sammy can't stand the accusations and runs out of the room. The protagonist didn't want everything to end like this, but that girl created problems for everyone and made up several stories, so in the end she deserved what was happening. Yumi is welcomed by the other students. She wipes her tears a little and looks back, grimacing at the protagonist, as if thanking him for his plan. A few hours later, the class came to an end and the students left. Yumi buys a can of soda and says that this is her thanks for the help. Kyosu looks at the can of drink and says that she never thought she would get something free from Yumi. The girl replies that she also knows how to give gifts to people. After talking to Yumi, the protagonist had the feeling of having mistaken her for someone else in his memories. Now he fears that he has confused other people too. Kyosu also realizes that this time it is taking a long time to create a plan to save the world, but at least he managed to help a new friend. Unlike his previous lives that he only cared about himself, the protagonist feels like he really can't do anything to stop the asteroid, so he decides to use the time he has to help people. He opens the can of drink and asks for a toast. Yumi agrees, and after that the two start drinking. The protagonist quickly remembers one thing and asks why she told about all the rumors spread by Sammy, since they had agreed to create a plan just to prove that Yumi was not a bad person. The girl replies that she thought about it, but wanted Sammy to feel in her skin what she suffered. The girl also says that she used the protagonist's reputation as an exemplary student to get the attention of the other students. Kyosu is shocked and asks if he seems to be an exemplary student. Yumi replies yes, but he is still very lonely. The girl adds that the view she has of the protagonist is that he is a book reader who only has Taku as his only friend, so that means he is a lonely exemplary student. Yumi also says that in the past she was friends with Sammy for a long time and knew that the girl had a habit of lying, so it didn't take long to find out that all those rumors were spread by her. The protagonist is surprised and the girl continues to say that she didn't expect him to have such a good plan. The truth is that when he arrived saying he had a solution, she felt like punching him in the face. Kyosu didn't believe he's hearing that. He thinks that all people know how to deal with the situation much better than he who is living his fourth life. Yumi says that he also had another reason to intervene in the situation.